What's up, everybody? I go by the name of Domo.
And I go by the name of Yoshiko.
We sit with entrepreneurs and artists across disciplines to share their stories, insight, and gems. Their journey will inspire you to think about community and your own narrative, how it shapes who you are, and what your legacy will be.
You're listening to No Blueprint.
No Blueprint.
No Blueprint.
No Blueprint.
You are listening to No Blueprint.
Well, it's good to be here. I am Minty LongEarth. I am Santee Creek and Choctaw, and I'm also a descendant from African American, Irish, Scottish, and Latinx people. And I'm a Seattleite. Glad to be here.
All right.
Naomi Ishisaka. I'm a native Seattle person as well. And let's see, what else do you want me to say?
Whatever you'd like.
Let's see, I'm a longtime journalist. I do a lot of photography, communications work, and graphic design in the Seattle area, and my particular interest is in race and social justice.
Nice. Naomi, you said you were you were born in Seattle?
Yep, born and raised.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so I grew up in the north end of Seattle, but it was in the era of busing. So I was bused to Garfield for high school, and that was a really, I would say, transformative part of my life in Seattle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Say more about that, because we've interviewed some folks who went to Garfield, and I think that from what I know, people really enjoy being a bulldog, and they take a lot of pride in being a bulldog. Mm-hmm. But I've also heard about the other side of Garfield, of who gets to be on the first floor mm-hmm. and who gets to be on the second floor.
Yeah. No, that's real. I think I'm probably a lot older than you are, significantly. So I was in school at Garfield in the early 90s. And back then, Seattle was really different than
mm-hmm.
it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So our school was slightly majority black, but the school itself was very much like you said. There was definitely tracks that created segregation in the school. Mm-hmm. That was very stark. I think my window into it was really unique in that I was in some of the classes that were segregated in that way, but then I was also in other classes that were where I was definitely one of the only non-black students in the mm-hmm. class. Mm-hmm. And so that gave me a window into lots of different aspects of the school, and I think really informed how I kind of saw the world after that, mm-hmm. and the perspective that I brought to the rest of my life.
Nice. And then how many generations has your family been in Seattle?
I guess, how many generations? I mean, my parents moved here. So my dad was actually a professor at the School of Social Work at UW for 30 plus years.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was kind of one of the first people to bring ethnic studies focus into the School of Social Work.
Wow.
Way awesome. Back in the early 70s. And my parents met in social work school in Berkeley in the 60s, and then came here in the early 70s, and then came me, and then the rest was history after that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Minty, where were you born?
I was born in Seattle at King County Hospital, which is now Harborview. And I was a product of adoption pre-Indian Child Welfare Act of 1974. I was adopted out in 1968. So my birth mother came up here from Alabama, and by way of Lakeland, Florida. And she went ahead and relinquished me up here because my birth grandparents were actually up here working on the oil pipeline as migrant workers. So lots of Southern people were doing that, especially Southern people when the mills and the picking bottomed out in the late 60s. So I was a product of a relationship that produced me, and I was placed for adoption here, and then lived here until 1982, and then moved down to Southern California and was living in Pomona and that area until 95, and then came back here.
Okay. Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at San Dimas High School, and if you're too young to remember, but if you ever saw a movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, I went to San Dimas High School, dude.
You said you saw the movie? Okay.
Yep. And it looked exactly like that. Yes. Yeah, that was it.
So what year did you come up here to live for the first time after high school?
1995.
Okay, and that was like after you had graduated, or?
Oh yeah, no, I had 2 daughters, one during high school and one right after I graduated from high school.
Okay.
And I did not want them to think that what life was like. By then we were living in Fontana, and I didn't want them to think that was normal. I didn't want them to think that it was normal to fight people based on their race, and I didn't think that it was normal for the level of crime that they were exposed to in my neighborhood. And I really thought that, you know, at least in Seattle, they would have an opportunity to have relationships with their family that don't look like them. They would be able to go to school and wear red or blue or black if they wanted to. I had raised them going to the library, and I'd be the only person in the library that looked like me. And I wanted them to see like the mountains and, you know, the water and opera and ballet and, you know, art. And they were smart kids, so saved up and, you know, came up here.
Nice. And then how much time did you spend in Seattle before you came up here?
I would come up here about once every couple years or so. There was a span that I didn't come up here for a few years. But I would usually come up, like bring my kids up here and let them hang out for the summer. My niece would come back and forth with us, and you know, the drive is 18 hours straight. And it's beautiful. It's easy I-5 straight shot. So yeah, we did a lot of that.
That's a long drive. Yeah. That's a long drive. Yeah. And then Naomi, what did you do after high school?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I started. I had a teacher who encouraged me to. He saw I was really interested in writing, and he saw that I was really quiet. But when I wrote, I like had a lot of thoughts that he didn't really see me express in class, because I was pretty introverted and pretty shy. So he encouraged me to be part of the journalism program at Garfield, and so I started doing that, and then got involved in a program that was run by the Seattle Times at the time, to get students of color involved in journalism in newspapers, called the Urban Newspaper Workshop. And I did that, and it really kind of like helped me see a path in journalism that I didn't previously really see, because I didn't really know anyone who had done that kind of work, but it introduced me to a lot of different mentors and people, as well as provided like a kind of a boot camp training on basic journalism skills and techniques. So after that, I went to Evergreen, and they didn't really have a journalism program per se, but I kind of created my own sort of journalism program there, coupled with ethnic studies, and became involved in the newspaper at Evergreen, and was very conscious of the fact that they didn't have like a J school, any kind of thing like that. So I started doing a lot of different internships to try to get more skills, and worked at pretty much most of the Puget Sound newspapers for several years, and really started getting more skills in like mainstream newspaper work on the editing side, and then really just fell in love with journalism and news and reporting and all the things that were associated with it.
Nice. Tell me the backstory of how it got started and how you both got involved with Colors Northwest.
Go, Minty, go.
Yeah. Well, this would be my memory of how it got started. So, Naomi, myself, and another founder, we were all working at the Seattle Times. Naomi and I met at the Seattle Times in our new employee orientation. And I just was smitten, like, immediately, because she had edited in college a book that when I moved up here, I was so, like, fascinated by, because I hadn't gone to college, and I was just like, oh my God. And so when she was talking about all these books at her orientation, she mentioned these books. I was like, I got to know her. And we connected. And then as the months progressed, the other partner who was in management, and we were not in management, we were union. And there was the beginnings of a strike. And Naomi at 24, were you 24? Wow. At 24, Naomi was like, deuces, I'm about to do this on behalf of, the labor union. It was fascinating because I was in marketing, so I got to watch it from being a spider on the wall without being in the middle. I wasn't management, and so it's so interesting to watch this like war battle on. And the partner that was still in management started saying, there's not a place for, what we want to do. Like, we don't want to compete with them, but we definitely want to start telling stories that are relevant. And so we started talking through, because he was my partner in life. And so we started talking through what that would look like. And he wanted one thing and I wanted one thing, and we kind of landed in the middle. But I said to him, he said, we need an editor-in-chief. And I was like, you've got to get with this badass. Like, you've got to see what she can do. And they connected right away. And when we started looking at funding, we had people telling us, nobody's going to want to read this. This is not going to go anywhere. And we had Assunta Ng say, oh, this is going to go everywhere, and I will put ads about your magazine in my newspaper, which is unheard of for a publication to advertise another publication. From that endorsement alone, we ended up having Macy's agreed to be the bond. Were they still the bond back then?
The bond washing.
Yeah, they decided to be the first inside ad full page.
Wow.
And that, of course, then meant people started like going, okay, we'll advertise with you. And you take it over from there.
Back in 2000, there was a pretty serious labor dispute within the Seattle Times, and I was on the executive board of the union for the Newspaper Guild, and strong labor supporter, advocate, an activist, and there was a move to try to get more benefits and salary for a certain segment of the Seattle Times staff. And so that led to a strike, which was a pretty brutal period, which led to basically, as we were coming back, because I was just very new to the newspaper, as that led to coming back to the newspaper after the strike ended, they basically told me that I either had to quit Colors Northwest, which I was doing while I was waiting to come back to work and wasn't getting paid for it. It was just something I was doing while I was waiting to come back, or I had to quit the Seattle Times. Those were the two choices that I was given. And we decided, the union and I decided that we were going to do a grievance, and then later led to an arbitration over the fact that they were telling me that Colors Northwest in its infancy was a competing publication to the Seattle Times.
Wow. Because
we had an advertiser. Like, we had like $2,000, and then we were therefore like a competition to the Seattle Times. And
you are a threat to the establishment.
Yeah, we in the union were just like, you got to be kidding me! Like, that's ridiculous. You know, we don't have anything.
Right.
We have a bunch of people that are volunteering and hope that it'll become to something because we care about what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But a threat to the Seattle Times, like, that's a stretch, you know. So, needless to say, I chose Colors Northwest, which was scary. It was scary to be young and had worked my whole career up to that point to get to the Seattle Times. That was kind of my goal and my dream. And I got there and then ended up like on strike and ended up, leaving and starting this incredible risk, beautiful risk that married the two things I love the most, like journalism and race and social justice, together into one entity. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty much a dream come true. It was like everything I'd ever wanted, like all wrapped up into one package.
Mm-hmm. And can y'all explain Colors Northwest to folks that either weren't there or just haven't heard of it?
Colors Northwest was the first of its kind. It was full color glossy, and it was a magazine that didn't just do the regular Benetton colors kind of thing, which was all that there was out there back then. It literally was looking at community in a different lens of how we tell stories. I had been a published poet and playwright since I was 8, but I had never been a journalist other than working for the Times. And so I had the passion for writing and for telling the story, but I didn't have the professional background. And Naomi had the professional background and had been blocked by, basic access because of what was going on with the strike. And then the other partner had the management background. We all had significant community ties that were being underutilized. Our contacts were, I don't think we even realized how connected we were until the magazine, exploded after 3 months. And I don't know where we were going with that question, but
just what Colors Northwest was.
Allergies, sorry. Colors was meant to let people figure out how rich community was by how much there was that you didn't know about. Even having our food section, which just became legendary, and being able to spotlight companies and organizations and efforts that nobody was talking about back then. And Naomi certainly brought a level of discipline in terms of the quality of production, because we would look at other publications and you would see, a real good attempt at writing, an honest attempt at editing, a good attempt at, lighting and photography. We held our standards to a much higher level. We wanted people to collect our magazine issues, and they did. We wanted you to walk down the street and wait for the day that we were releasing the next issue, and they did. And we did it with bare bones. We had nothing. Our first cover had my cousin Leilani with her basketball, and I did her makeup, and Naomi found somebody to shoot her, and we did it at El Centro de la Raza, and and that cover to this day is this cover that people have framed on their walls.
Wow.
We were the first to talk about two spirits in any publication anywhere. We became this kind of groundbreaking thing. When 9/11 hit, our publication was what people looked to for the real human stories that were going on.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things that I'm really proud of about the magazine was that before people started talking about intersectionality, it was intersectional. So coming at it from a lens that was very deeply rooted in communities of color, we were very clear that we weren't there to just do the feel good, everyone, pat each other on the back about how diverse we were, quote unquote. It was around, some of the stuff that I was most proud of was things like the Two-Spirit cover that we did, or the stories about homophobia, or the stories that really forced people to look at the ways in which we as communities of color were not necessarily living up to the idea of a beloved community that we like to talk about when Martin Luther King Day rolled around, right?
Yeah.
One of the stories that I was really proud of was a story about just that. We brought together a bunch of faith leaders and asked them about what they thought. This is when George W. Bush was elected the second time. And a lot of the reason why people said that he was elected was because there was a sort of revolt in some communities of color to reject gay rights initiatives.
Wow.
And so we brought these faith leaders together to ask them, what do you think is the role of faith communities? What do you think would be what the path that a leader like MLK would bring to this conversation? And they were brutally honest, and they were very, very challenging. And even though they were faith leaders, they were very, very tough on our own communities, and just being who do we want to be? Who are we to each other? What can we do to be better to each other? And it was a really tough conversation, and it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, because it was basically calling out homophobia in our own communities in a really tough way. But it was also the kind of conversation where a lot of people were I feel seen for the first time in my life. I feel like I can actually be this and that, and somebody actually sees that in me, right? So
That's
it's
fine.
really, really powerful. And I think that's the area that we really pushed boundaries and really excelled. Because anyone can do, like, we always said, like, we're not going to be like the festivals, you know, like
Right.
type of publication. We weren't just going to do the fun, like, children dancing in their native garb sort of festival thing, right?
Yes.
We were going to get beyond that and ask hard questions and tough questions of each other and ourselves, to hopefully get to a better place, a better level.
Yes.
And we quickly expanded, because then it became not just people wanting to hear the stories, but they wanting us to facilitate opportunities. And so we found that we were expanding into bringing to light, like, we had like town hall with a comic night, and we had all these comedians of color that were, being marginalized from the entertainment up here. We definitely started to put our hand into trainings, because a lot of us had a training background, and so we were doing a lot of equity training before there was equity training. Some of the curriculums that we developed, nobody had ever been talking about, and then that became us to morph into, okay, let's also add a portal for people who are interested in walking their talk when they say we want to hire from a diverse pool of candidates. Well, then why aren't you interacting in our community in a real way? And so we just sort of got bigger and bigger based on what the community would come to us with their needs about. So it was an interesting morph.
How was the magazine Colors Northwest distributed?
We had a robust distribution. We were in, what do you call them? The boxes. What do we call those boxes?
Street
Newspaper
boxes.
Yeah, street
I
boxes.
used to pick up copies from the Red Apple.
Yes, we had a good deal with
Nice.
Red Apple. Yeah,
That's legit.
yeah,
And
we
what-
were all over.
And then, like, different storefronts and things like that too. There was like the boxes and then storefronts, and then organizations, things like that would have stacks of them.
Nice.
Yep, libraries. Yeah,
Like medical offices, things like that.
That's
very
crazy.
accessible areas. We spent a lot of time researching where those best locations would be.
Wow.
Yeah.
What year was the what month and year was the first issue?
April 2001.
Wow.
For April Fool's Day. We did. April
Yes.
Fool's Day.
Nice. Was
And
that
we had
purposeful?
our launch at Awajimaya.
Wow. That's
Yep.
super awesome.
Everything we did was intentional. Everything.
How big was the staff
At what time?
At what time?
in the
Yeah.
beginning?
Oh,
Small.
Yeah, you.
Very
me,
small.
It.
We
The
have should not be
photographer. Yeah, not Voldemort. 4 to 5. Was it 5?
Yeah, but in terms of, like, that was like wasn't full-time staff.
Right, and
Okay.
again, we weren't
Nobody
making
was
any
And
money.
you said you
We
weren't making
paid.
any money.
No.
We weren't getting
Nobody
paid.
was getting paid.
We
No.
were in my basement of our house. We were in the
wow.
basement. She had her office in the basement of the house.
Wow.
And yeah, we were in the basement for the first 2 years. We didn't even go storefront until then.
When did you start getting paid?
Oh God, that was a while.
Mm-hmm.
April, I think.
Because just the printing costs alone,
Yeah.
like, can you imagine, like,
Yeah.
trying to be a by and for a Communes of Color
Right.
print publication monthly?
Yeah.
Just the print costs alone were huge, right?
Well,
So
absolutely.
It's
All
been
of-
a long time, but I think the first 2 paychecks were you and the GM, and they were like a fraction of. They were like a. Hope you can get some coffee.
yeah,
Yeah, it was pretty much like that. It was pretty bad,
Wow.
and that probably wasn't until. Well, it was after the 9/11, so I don't think you got paid until that October when we got some significant
And it
advertising.
started on April
Probably.
Fool's Day.
yeah.
Yeah.
What were you
And
doing?
we're talking like 60, 70, 80 hours a week.
I was about to say, wow.
Because we were working constantly. We're talking constantly. We were everything was just
Wow.
Because it was just
obsessive.
starting up. I was receiving unemployment for a
Oh,
good
okay.
part of that.
Okay.
So that was covering my basic
Got
living
it.
expenses. Obviously, my income had declined significantly.
Right.
And I think that was like one of the biggest lessons that I took from that experience was like, even though I'd been sort of conservative and cautious about all my different career moves, and was like very, deliberate and systematic about like, I do this and I get that internship and I do that. And then, eventually I'll work at the Seattle Times and everything will be great. This did not follow that playbook at all. This was like jumping off a cliff with no parachute, no guarantee of survival. It was just like a really, if you were to look at it objectively, a really bad career choice.
So what made you, what was it for you that made you like give so much of your time to this?
Well, I mean, as I said, it was like a dream come true. It was like marrying the two things that I love the most, right? So when I was in college, I was like, ethnic studies major and a journalism major, right? So you like take the two things I'm most passionate about, and it wasn't even possible in the world that I understood. Like I knew that when you go into newspapers, you have to make a lot of sacrifices in terms of like the things that you care about versus the things that you're working on, and that's just the way life is. And I had accepted that, right? And then here's this thing that's like actually, I was describing it to someone actually last night, and I was like, when I was working in newspapers, it was like always pushing against the tide. It was like the things that I valued and cared about, constantly pushing against the tide, trying to get a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. Okay. And then at Colors and Flats, it was like the tide was actually moving in my direction for the first time. It was like going my way. And people that actually understood where I was coming from and had a shared sense of values and shared sense of beliefs around what we need to do as a community to move forward. And so that altogether was just like, an offer I couldn't refuse, and didn't refuse.
I was gonna say, it's almost like while we're here, you're sitting in this really hot room.
We'd like to say we haven't done this, but we've actually done this.
Been there.
And that was another thing that we, I think we often told people after that was just like, don't get caught up with the trappings of or what you think, success is, right? Like we could be in a basement working on, copying computers or whatever it is that you need to do, and that's not what it's about. You know? I remember a person who should not be named would say, like, if it doesn't matter what your kitchen looks like as long as your dinner table is clean. And that was really our philosophy. It was just like the product we produce is going to be professional, it's going to have integrity, it's going to have quality, it's going to respect the varied parts of our humanity as communities of color. But how we got there, it's not going to be like downtown Class A office space. It's just not. And that's okay. It doesn't matter. That kind of stuff doesn't matter.
How did y'all know that y'all had something?
Oh, man. We knew pretty quickly. When we say it exploded, it did, because we didn't have the expectations of this coming out and just, being what it was. We knew it was possible, but we had so many naysayers, and there was no blueprint for it. And ironically, you're welcome. And
let me pick that up. All right. And you were saying,
I think everybody knew at a different time, but I think when I knew was when Naomi and He Who Shall Not Be Named were invited about 4 months in. They were invited to Unity. And I think for me as a marketing person, that's when I knew we were a force to contend with, because we were still a startup. But it was other journalists who were like, yo, this right here, this is something. And so when they started getting invitations to access that other startup publications would have never seen. And when we were being invited to the table, and the three of us, we were getting invitations to, we had, an invitation to sit with the governor and talk to the governor. We had an invitation for, can you come in and do a proposal to work with, the city on their curriculum around cultural competence. And then, the awards were kind of shocking, because we were getting awards that were really high, visible awards. But I think everybody had a different moment where they knew that was when we were actually doing okay. And I suspect that yours probably came further, because you were so hard on yourself that there was nothing anybody could have said. You would have been like, that's not enough. It's not enough. That's true. Everybody wanted to pump us up. and we had come off of the times, and so we already understood that that was fleeting and superficial and frankly very inconsistent. So we kept in mind what it would be like for when we were going to tell a story that wasn't popular or that really pissed off people, so that we didn't have our egos all attached to how people were telling us how great we were. We were like, give it time.
What was the highest level of happiness for both of y'all when you guys were the happiest, and you knew that you had made the right decision to work on this magazine and all of that?
I mean, I guess I felt like that the whole time.
Okay.
Like I felt like I was in my element, and it was like my calling, up until the time I left.
I felt it was my calling. I felt it was a true gift. I felt it was what I was supposed to be doing. I was not happy at all, not for 1 minute.
The whole time?
No.
Wow.
Interesting.
Wow.
I felt all of this pride, and yet I was being gaslit at home and being told, that I was not enough, or that I didn't bring anything to the table. I was, or that, you don't have a degree, so I don't even know why you're here. And then we would put on a happy face and we would go out and wave at the crowd and all that. Wow. And so I had this constant feeling that I was like that. What's that called? The Oprah factor, where I was waiting to be discovered for being, like useless. And so I was always like, well,
Imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome, yeah. And so I did feel that. But then I also felt like, a lot of the ideas that I would have that would have to go through the publisher were being hindered by the interpersonal relationship of me and the publisher. So, when I tell people, don't ever get into business with your partner, because you can never turn it off. You can never take it off. You get home and you owe thousands of dollars, or you got people that are pissed at you, or you've got people who want to gas on both of y'all, or you got people who are trying to interfere with your relationship. Somebody would see me as the catch du jour and be coming at me, and somebody would come at them, and you end up feeling like, there's never a downtime. There's never time. Even if you're going on vacation, what do you think we're talking about on the plane, at the airport, when we get there? What are we fighting about? It's all about how everything is there. And so I think for me, when it started to end, I felt a huge sense of relief. And I've told people over the years, like, I was so glad when people stopped recognizing me with colors. Like, that was a big relief. Because I just could not trust that people were actually interacting with me because they liked me, or because they thought that they somehow were going to get access through colors, because that was my experience, was that I discovered there were a lot of hangers-on. There were a lot of people that were there just for, being able to get into places and go places. And then those of us that had been there from the get, we were being pushed and pulled in every direction. So no, I was not happy.
Wow. When did things start to go south?
Minty?
Depends on who you would ask.
Sips water.
Yeah, depends on who you would ask. For me, as a co-founder, by 2006, I was pretty done. I was done. I was uncovering some things that were troubling to me that I didn't know were linked to the business, and they were just personal stuff. And then 2007 got pretty bad when external people started to really want to get involved. And then by 2008, Naomi was trying everything to figure out how to survive the 2008 economic crisis, and had pretty much no support whatsoever. There was a lot of denial from myself and the board, a lot of denial. A lot of, this is just going to turn itself around any moment. Naomi and other folks saying, it's not going to turn around, so we need a different business model. And all of us going, what do they know? We're the ones that are handling, but like, that's where you started to see the divide, because we were unable to listen to the same people who we had listened to from day one. All of a sudden, we couldn't hear them because of our own bullshit, right? So once we stopped listening, karma has a way of being like, let's slow down this whole thing. And then I think that it became a matter of just survival, just to try and get to the next issue. And by 2009, it was done. Wow. And it was done with really, there was no send-off. There was no closure. And the people who had put their blood, sweat, and tears were left just kind of going, what happened? So, yeah, it was a rough time.
What now? I guess is a question for especially entrepreneurs who are tied to, like, some of us are doing things out of just the, volunteer based, or just things that we love. Like, how do we navigate through toxic just masculinity? How do we not become folks who are in toxic masculinity? Not that folks are being asked to answer like to educate people, but yeah.
I mean, I think the accountability piece is huge, right? Like, I think it was just sort of like accepted, and when I reflect on it, I'm sort of ashamed of myself. When I realized, like, it wasn't until this whole Me Too thing for me even where I even expected anything to ever happen to anyone, that it was just kind of like, that's just how life is, right?
Exactly.
Even for me, like a diehard feminist radical thinking person, I just assumed that was just the way the world worked.
It's like, men are trash, and that's just how it goes.
And stuff that happened to me, what can you do? That's just how life is. That's just the world. That's just the world we live in as women, right? And it wasn't until this whole revolution happened that I was like, whoa, how do I even get to the point where I'm so brainwashed that it never even occurred to me that anything could change or there could be any accountability. It just wasn't even in my consciousness, which is just shocking and just how horrifying, honestly. And so it's only been in the last a few months or so that it ever even dawned on me that we could ask more. We could actually ask more, demand more, expect more,
Absolutely.
And I think for me it was timing, because I think that, where you are reflects a lot in how you treat people and how you interact and how you can receive healing. And so in 2011, I bumped into Naomi right down the street at the bakery. And she was excited to see me, and I wasn't sure how to, because I was really excited to see her, but I had been holding on to this, because I'm a 9/11 Virgo. I can hold on to a grudge forever. And and so I wanted to hold the grudge. At the same time, I wanted to, grab her and, swing her around and go, oh my God, we survived that crazy bullshit. Sorry, I used the word again. I'm working on it, people. I'm working on it. But it felt like we survived some real nasty trauma. And I didn't know how to show up with that. And so I kind of froze, and I did an awkward wave, and then I left the bakery, and when I got to my door, my job, she had left her business card and said, would like to catch up with you. And it took me a month, because I was like, I don't know. What she doesn't know is, being a Virgo, I obsessed for a month. I'm talking to all my coworkers, how do I wrote 100 emails of Dear Nay, okay, never mind, and it was just I was over the top. And then when I did email her, I got a bounce back because I had the wrong email, because I had lost her card by then, and so I was trying to go off of memory. But then I blocked myself from looking on the internet, which meant that clearly I was going through some weird shit.
I'm the easiest person to check
exactly,
out in the
totally
whole world.
easy. So then cut to 2015, and I am working for the city, and I go down to catch the light rail, and she's there. And this time, I was going in for the hug. That was it. Whether she was ready for the hug or not, I was going in. And it felt like timing. For me, it was I didn't appreciate you. I didn't understand what we were doing in a deeper feminist level that could have been so much bigger. And I missed my friend. That was true. We, once we got separated from each other, it was just then about the work and being pitted against each other. And because we are really strong women and very intelligent women, we were pitted against each other more like gladiators. It wasn't the normal, it was gaslighting and lying and, and telling her that she could do something and telling me I could do something. And then when we're both doing it, we're both like, what are you doing? Like, it was all kinds of stuff. And so I felt like as I got more healthy of the way that I looked at the toxic masculinity that I had allowed and permitted to make choices and decisions in my life, I realized that the timing was just going to change. And then a year ago was when our mutual friend was like, oh, I'm gonna have Naomi on Breakdances, and I was so excited. And so from when she came on the show, it was like old times, like the first time. It was, and I remember feeling like so grounded. And I love my program, but I felt totally grounded having her next to me and still being able to read off of her. And you get that relationship so rarely in business that if you find it and you don't go on it, you're missing out.
Absolutely.
But before you say this, I do want to say that I hate to tell you this, but if I were giving advice to anyone, Diana, I love Dominique, but if you are going to go into a business relationship with a man, everything has to be in writing and legal. I don't give a damn how much you like this brother. He is a dangler, and danglers will dangle. And they don't mean to. They can be like, I shall not dangle. I resist all dangling, and yet that dangling will happen, and you will wish that you had treated this the same way as you would treat any other business deal. Pretend like you don't know that person. I wish that I had done that. Had I done that, it would have played itself out completely different.
No, I appreciate that. And that will stay as is.
Right.
Because I 100% agree.
Yeah.
1000%. And you basically answered my next question, because that was going to be my question. I was like, well, how would you advise folks who were getting into entrepreneurship or thinking about getting into entrepreneurship to move forward? It's specifically thinking about young women. But that
surround yourself with women.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with women who are going to tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear.
Yeah, and I think, like, and I'm a journalist at heart, so I'm always thinking about in relation to journalism, but I think that, particularly in the case of journalism, we have to have an inside and outside strategy, right? Like, there are cultural forces at work that are making the landscape near impossible for folks to do like what we did at Colors Northwest. So it was hard when we did it. It's even harder now. So how do you change the cultural landscape? And that's going to involve having lots of conversations outside of whatever sector you're in, to get people to think about this differently. Absolutely. And that's going to be a cultural shift, and that's going to be a long time process. But I think that we need to have it, and we need to be talking to people in other cities and finding out how they did it and how they have funding mechanisms, because it's really the funding at the end of the day. Like, honestly, if we had all the money we needed,
we'd still be here.
We would be still here. And we wouldn't be...
Voldemort wouldn't, but we would.
Right, we would be here. And we would be doing great work, and we'd be contributing to the landscape of the city. We'd be changing people's hearts and minds and doing the things that we're passionate and care about. Because we don't have access to those resources, we're not able to do that, and that is a damn shame.
Right. What projects are y'all working on now, and how can people keep in touch?
Yeah. So I'm working on a bunch of different things, both in terms of writing and photography for different clients, both in the city and other entities and other publications that'll be coming out soon. But my website is naomiishisaka.com, very creative. And you can find my writing and photography and design work there. And I try to keep it pretty up to date, but don't always succeed. But yeah, I'm around.
And you're on some boards?
Yeah, I'm on a bunch of different boards for various purposes. And yeah, Center for Media Justice is one that I'm really excited about and passionate about.
And taking a lot of cool photos at a lot of cool events.
Lots of cool photos, lots of cool events, lots of cool
Yes.
people. So yeah, that's really fun, and it's a real passion. So
I'm the co-host of Breakdances with Wolves Indigenous Pirate Radio podcast with Jossie Ross and Wesley Roach.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
My favorite podcast.
We're just some natives with an opinion and a platform. I still continue to do genealogy research, and I'm working on a large project that I'm not allowed to talk about right now, but you will know about it when it comes out in a book that I'm not writing, but I'm doing the research for it. This will be the third book that we have worked on together, and so I'm excited about that. I am on the board for HOIT, which protects the rights of Indigenous people impacted by incarceration. And I am the board chair of Heal for Reentry, which is also helping expand on and enhance Aboriginal lives impacted by incarceration. And I am on the board for Public Defender Association. Wow. And I'm a longtime board member of the University of Washington's Native American Advisory Board.
Wow.
So we still keep a little busy.
Y'all listen. I don't feel like I'm doing enough now.
Right. I also work for the Social Justice Fund as the communications director, so I should mention that.
The director.
And I work in civilian oversight of law enforcement. We actually have like day jobs too. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
This is Naomi Ishisaka, and you're listening to No Blueprint Podcast.
This is Minty LongEarth, and you're listening to No Blueprint Podcast.
If you liked what you heard, be sure to donate so we can keep going. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube, so be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment. You have no idea how much it helps. We also want to know what you think. You can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and you can even use the hashtag NoBlueprint. And if you're really down with the movement, you can join our Patreon account and become a patron, where you'll get exclusive content and limited edition merchandise. No Blueprint is powered by Ambassador Stories. We share stories of the people, places, and spaces that bring soul to our communities. No Blueprint is recorded at Ambassador Stories Studios and co-produced with me, Maya Aina. Hear more episodes of No Blueprint and get official No Blueprint merchandise at noblueprintpodcast.com.